Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on lessons learned from our Cloud ERP implementations. I am Perry from Cloud Ascent. We are a platform and product company that focus on accelerating our clients' ERP cloud adoption using automation and analytics. And today, I am joined by two eminent panelists, uh, Prabhu Balasubramaniam, who is the founder of Transys Solution, which very recently moved to the Tech Mahindra family. And we also have Eric Kimberling, the founder and CEO of Third Stage Consulting, a niche independent ERP consulting firm based out of Denver, Colorado. Between Prabhu and Eric, there is a vast and extensive amount of ERP implementation experience spreading back to almost 20 plus years. And we hope you will find our discussions today very interesting. Just to set the context, implementing ERP is inherently complex, perhaps due to the broad range of business processes it touches or the people it impacts, be it users, be it employees, customers, or other partners. Cloud ERP, which has been growing in acceptance in the past few years, brings about certain peculiar challenges. Again, perhaps due to the shared nature of the platform. So today's webinar is all about some of those peculiar challenges, especially from people on the forefront, like Eric and Prabhu, and the lessons learned from them to help us perhaps do our own ongoing engagements more successfully. Just to give you a quick idea about the format, both the panelists will be presenting their views initially for about 10 to 15 minutes each, after which we will open it up for Q&A. You can start posing your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have already received a few questions and we'll take them after the end of the presentation. With this, I invite our first speaker, Eric, to run the presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Perry. As mentioned, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformations and ERP related projects. And we have offices, we're headquartered in the US in Denver, Colorado, but we also have offices in London in the UK and Brisbane, Australia as well. So we've worked with a lot of different companies throughout the world with their transformations. I started my career at one of the big consulting firms. And the reason I started Third Stage can be traced back to my experience at that large consulting firm. And the reason I had the idea for an independent consulting firm was because I felt as though many of the consultants in the industry were biased or were leading towards certain solutions that may or may not be the best fit for clients. So that was the whole premise for how I started Third Stage, was to really help fill a void or a niche in the market that would help clients with unbiased and unfiltered recommendations and advice throughout their transformations. Some of the things that we'll talk about here today are based on that experience working with companies ranging from Fortune 500 companies, large multinational companies, all the way down to small and mid-sized companies as well. So a lot of the lessons that I wanted to share today are based on some of those experiences. And the first thing that we're often asked when we're helping a new client is, what exactly does this digital transformation mean? It's a pretty broad term. It's used by a lot of different industries. A lot of different people have different definitions of what digital transformation is. And there is no one universal answer for digital transformation. And the closest thing that I can think of is to describe digital transformation as the use of enterprise technology to help make your business better. And for any organization that has a need for enterprise technology, they all have every company has different priorities and different goals and objectives they're trying to accomplish. So different types of technologies are going to be more relevant to some companies and less relevant to others, and vice versa. So when we think of digital transformation, some of the technologies that we help our clients with and some of the technologies we see organizations trying to implement are things like ERP is probably the most common, well-known type of digital transformation. And that could be a full end-to-end enterprise system that would help automate an entire business. But in addition to that, you also have other types of technologies that can either replace or bolt onto or operate independently from ERP systems. So you have things like analytics and CRM and human capital management and some of those types of technologies. So the whole idea here is that there's a lot of buzzwords out there around artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and Industry 4.0 and things of that nature. And the key is to sift through the different technologies to find the technology that's the best fit for you. And so we'll move on to the next slide here, where I wanted to talk a bit about some of the challenges of digital transformation. And Perry mentioned at the beginning of the webinar in the introduction that ERP implementations are inherently complex. There's a lot of upside potential and benefit potential from ERP and digital transformation technology, but there's also challenges that companies commonly struggle with. And these are the top 5 challenges that we've seen organizations struggle with in their journeys to digitize their businesses. And what you'll see here is that most of the difficulty in these top 5 reasons for difficulty and challenges during implementation are largely unrelated to the software or the technology itself. It's more about the difficulties that companies have with the people and the process side of things, as well as the operational and strategic alignment and making sure that the digital transformation and ERP project is aligned with what the company is trying to accomplish. So, for example, we worked with a very large multinational company recently that wanted us to help them with an ERP implementation. And one of the first things they said to us is, well, we want to standardize our operations across all of our locations. We want to have a common operating model. We obviously want to use one single system, and we don't want to customize the technology. We want that to be our vision for this transformation. And that was the goal of the organization as a whole, was that they had gone out and acquired all these different companies, and they wanted to consolidate and standardize all these different acquisitions they had made. But what ended up happening is when it came time to implement the technology, they couldn't decide on what the standardization meant, who was right, or what the right answer was for how their operations were going to look and how different roles and responsibilities were going to look. So what they ended up doing is at first, they ended up starting to create separate implementations for different parts of the business just to accommodate the different needs there. And so we had to redirect them and have them kind of come back and realign the project with the goals and objectives, because they were going off the track and going down a path that wasn't going to help them accomplish those goals that they originally had. So when you think about those sorts of challenges, that's one example of many that I could give you that tie back to the fact that the technology they were implementing was not the problem. But the problem was they internally could not get aligned on what they wanted the project to be. And until they got that alignment, that's when they started to be more successful in that implementation. So those are some of the major challenges of implementations that we see. And so what I wanted to do in the rest of this portion of the presentation is talk about some of the 5 major lessons learned, in addition to what I've already talked about, that we see with organizations going through this process. So the first lesson that we see with organizations we work with is that we want to make sure that business is driving the technology and not necessarily letting the technology drive the business. And this is a hard one to understand for a lot of people, because a lot of times people think, well, if I'm going to buy new technology, I'm buying the technology because it can do things that I can't do right now. So I want that technology to guide me and to give me capabilities that I don't currently have. And that's okay. We want to do that. But the challenge with that is we also want to have a clear vision of what we want our business to be in the future. So the technology may help us define exactly how we'll run our business in the future and how we'll capture data and how information will flow. But we have to define the what and the why. We have to define what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the high level business processes should look like, how we want our organization to look. If we, for example, in the example I gave you a few minutes ago with the global multinational company that had gone out and acquired a bunch of companies, we had to spend time up front defining how are we going to consolidate the accounting department? How are we going to consolidate the HR department so that we act as one company and we leverage and get synergies of the size and scale of the company? And we can't rely on the technology to define that for us. We have to define what we want our business to be. And then we can use the technology to help make us better and to automate those processes and to give us capabilities that we don't have. So it's important to think of it as more of a business blueprint that you want to define for yourself first, and then allow the technology to enable and improve that business blueprint. And the companies that do that well are the ones that tend to be the most successful. And then a second lesson that we have from our experience with different clients is that a lot of times companies have so much trouble selecting the perfect software. They want that perfect technology that's the exact fit with everything they want. And unfortunately, that technology doesn't exist for any organization. There is no perfect technology. Every technology has strengths and weaknesses, and there's trade-offs you make with any sort of technological decision. And so a lot of times companies spend a lot of time overanalyzing the different options in the marketplace. And it's certainly important to go out and find the most appropriate software and make sure you find the software that's a good fit. But at some point you get a point of diminishing returns where we're going to continue to analyze and look for that perfect answer, but we're not going to find it. So let's shift some of that focus into implementation, because if we find a system that's a pretty good fit, and let's just say it's 80 or 90% of what we need, then let's move forward with that. And let's make sure we have a good plan and a good business blueprint. And let's really invest that time and money instead on overanalyzing which product is the best for us. Let's spend that time and money implementing it really well. One thing I always tell clients is I would rather have an imperfect software decision, but have a really strong implementation, rather than having a somewhat more perfect or perceived to be more perfect software selection that we spent a lot of time and money on, but then we don't have the time and resources to implement well. I'd always take the situation where it may be an imperfect technological solution, but we spend a lot of time and money making sure we get it right and how we implement it. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons is, yes, take your time as far as looking at different options and make sure you do your homework and get objective viewpoints on what technology could be the best fit for you, but don't overthink it. And once you find something that you feel pretty comfortable with and you feel that is pretty close, then reallocate those resources and time and money to make sure you get the implementation right, because that's the part that's going to make you successful. So another point here is to take your time and control the project tempo. And what I mean by that is I'm not suggesting that you just go really slow and it's okay to miss milestones, it's okay to delay the project. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is make sure you set a tempo and a project plan and a cadence that makes the most sense for your organization. A lot of times software vendors will think, well, our technology can be implemented very quickly. And that's true. You can implement technology extremely quickly and effectively, but the challenge is how quickly and effectively can we actually adopt and embed that technology within our operations. That's the hard part. The technology, if you're working with good technical consultants, people that know the technology really well, they can implement usually a lot faster than your organization is going to be able to adapt to and absorb that technology. So you really want to make sure that, if a software vendor tells you that, we can implement the solution for you in, say, 6 months, let's just say as an example, that may be true, but we also have to look at, okay, they can implement and they can design and build the test the technology in 6 months, but what's it really going to take for us to train our people, to make sure we do enough user acceptance testing, to make sure we clean up our data, make sure we do all the change management stuff, the business process improvement type stuff that we know we need to roll out within our organizations. All those things are things that are going to add to your time frame. And I'm not suggesting that you want to spend years and years and years spinning your wheels trying to implement a solution, but you want to be realistic and have a really solid plan for what it is yours is going to look like. And one of the things I'll note too is that one of the things we see with project failures more often than not is when companies hire us to help recover a project failure, or when we come in as expert witnesses, when it's a lawsuit situation where we get hired to analyze a failure to write a report for a lawsuit. What we find is a lot of times the problems start with unrealistic expectations because we never had a realistic plan to begin with, and therefore we didn't allocate enough time and resources to the project, and that caused us to have a lot of other problems later on because we didn't have a realistic plan to begin with. So it's really important to have that realistic plan and really take your time and control that project tempo. And then the final thing that's the most important thing in making a ERP or digital transformation project successful is the people important, the change management. And a lot of times when people think of change management, they think of training or communications, the real basic technology adoption types of change management. And that stuff is very important. But what's even more important and what needs to happen before we do the training and communications are the things like the organizational design. Let's design what our organization is going to look like in the future so that we have a clear vision of how the technology will fit within that. So, for example, if you're an organization that is multinational, and let's just say you have 5 different procurement departments throughout your organization, and you see an opportunity to consolidate those procurement departments into one and have one centralized procurement department so that you can leverage your size and scale and get better pricing from your vendors. We need to find what that looks like. How are we going to build that organization so that when we roll out the technology, we're doing that in this new environment, not the way we used to operate. So that's an example of how we want to design the organization, identify how people's jobs are going to change. Another really good example that's very technology based, that's very important, especially today, when you think about things like machine learning or artificial intelligence, for example. Those are game-changing technologies that can automate your business in a way that no other technology has been able to in the past, in the past 10, 20, 30 years, which is great. Artificial intelligence, machine learning is great technology that can do a lot for a business, but it has a huge impact on an organization because that means now you're automating things that some people spent their entire careers doing these things, and now you're suddenly going to automate. So what are you going to do with those people? How are their jobs going to change? How are you going to make them comfortable that they're going to be reallocated in a way that is going to leverage their strengths? Or you really have to think those things through because otherwise we're just going to roll this technology out and no one's going to want to use it because it's scary. And so we have to, from a change perspective, make sure we address those things. So change management is the number one thing I would say. If you had to remember one thing from these lessons, it would be that organizational change management is the number one thing that'll determine how successful your project is. So that's all I've got for you. So thank you very much, Perry.
Thank you, Eric. That was very insightful. In fact, thank you for first giving us an overarching framework of the challenges of a digital transformation and correlating it with a cloud ERP implementation. And as you know, cloud ERPs typically form a major portion of our clients' digital transformation. And it was very insightful. We already got a few questions regarding some of your points, which we will probably take up in the Q&A after Prabhu's discussion. So with this, Prabhu, I'm just handing over the control to you. I'll just share the presentation. Over to you, Prabhu.
Thanks, Perry. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of you. My name is Prabhu. I come with about 23 plus years of ERP experience, practicing ERP experience, having implemented variety of sized organizations across various regions. 10 years ago, we established or founded Transys Solutions with a niche focus on Oracle in general and cloud in particular last 5 years. I've been able to build it up to an organization that can get into Gartner's Magic Quadrant as well for Oracle Cloud applications. We recently, or rather we are in the process of becoming part of the Tech Mahindra family, whose story on or strength on Oracle goes back to 23 plus years, right? That's the days when I started my career with Satyam as well. As part of this organization, which is about close to 9,000 plus employees on Oracle, significant investments in cloud and assets, 50 plus digital assets, a strong close to $500 million of revenue coming from Oracle. The work that we have done together as Tech Mahindra and Transys have won us quite a few awards. Again, awards across the regions, Middle East, Africa, Europe, and so on. As a background, I, of course, I've come with an accounting background, a cost accountant by qualification. I've been in line finance for 6 years. So the experiences that we have got or what we will share have a combination of what we have seen, what we have faced as we go along in delivering this kind of transformational solutions. Oftentimes, success of cloud adoption, right, or a cloud-led transformation, large organizations adopting the cloud effectively and going through the project successfully. We've also seen relatively smaller sized organizations struggling, right? So it's not like smaller sized organizations can have a quick and easy success vis-a-vis larger organizations. But what, of course, influence the success of a cloud-led transformation is a geographical spread versus or a multi-LOB spread. And that's where during implementation, you got to spend more time in coming up with a solution, right solution approach, right solution template, right? I've seen a large single LOB organization, right, spread across 9 different countries, 16 different business entities, all in a single line of business, going through adopting the complete ERP successfully, then a single country, a multi-LOB business, right? Multiple lines of business, trading, construction, real estate, and so on, but in a single country, which you would tend to think, right, should be easy because it's one single country, you don't have to worry about legislation, going through a lot of challenges, right? So the size of the organization in terms of the spread, right, line of business spread vis-a-vis a geographical spread does influence in the complexity of the solution that we are delivering, the time it takes to implement, and the areas as an implementer one should focus on, as a implementing organization one should focus on. Another very important aspect is while we talk about in the context of any cloud ERP processes being standardized, right, the differentiating functions for the industry or for a business in that industry oftentimes also influences how effectively we're able to deliver cloud, and also even internally as their cloud journey, they look at a single unified solution, do we go for a best of breed solution, and so on. So these, and there are, of course, I'm sure many more aspects that would influence, but these are the top 3 typically influencing factors in a cloud journey and success of the cloud journey. As Eric mentioned, in terms of what the key lessons that you learned, right? What are the influencing factors, again, from taking a company and looking at the implementation in there. People, process, technology is invariably, right, the 3 key players in any transformation effort, right? There, oftentimes, technology is the least challenge, and I think I would agree with what Eric said, right? Don't spend more time in evaluating and selecting the software, because pretty much the top tier products, proven products, they do most of what a business needs, 80-90% they would do. You got to focus on what's unique to you, what is what we saw as an industry differentiating functions, right? That is where the processes come in to play. So from a technology, which we'll see, of course, in detail as we go along, right? Technology is the easiest piece that one can manage, but what it calls for is a significant shift in the mindset, both of the business as well as that of the IT team. Imagine telling an IT manager or a CIO that if you want to clone your production to test, for you to simulate something, sorry, Perry, you have to go back. So if you have to simulate something from production to test, you got to plan it 3 weeks ahead, 4 weeks ahead. Whereas in a traditional on-premise, you end up doing it, you plan it for tomorrow, you want to do a clone, you just operationalize it. Whereas with cloud adoption, you got to plan really weeks ahead, right, in terms of cloning. So that's a mindset change. Telling a CIO that, guys, you want a data which is there in the system, but you don't have a backend access, right? Stuff like that, which you take for granted in an on-premise legacy implementations are a significant culture shock for organizations we have seen. People is again an extremely important aspect. Oftentimes we see them, we often say the culture of the organization is driven by the people and their behavior. If you look at organizations with the right people staffed for the implementation, right, and they have a greater level of success than people who are varying or people who are playing a negative role. Processes is a most critical aspect in any successful implementation, and we will see the detail of this in the subsequent slide. While the overarching aspect of program governance, right, and that's as Eric was highlighting earlier, is very critical place. And from a program governance which controls the scope, program governance which defines the tempo of the project or the timeline that you take, the milestones, the entry exit criteria of a project is very important in the whole implementation. Oftentimes we see we get into UAT and then people coming up with requirements, right? And that's not new to most of us as consultants. The best way you control them is through an effective program governance, project management, toll gates, and control what gets covered in every milestone and have them properly signed off. So program governance is very important of all of these components in a journey, a transformation journey. Sorry, it's not moving. So when you come to process, right, which is we talked about earlier, oftentimes in any cloud journey, the processes are, every organization says, I'm unique, my processes are unique, and this is how we have been doing for 20 years, and so on, X number of years, right? So in any cloud implementation, start with asking questions or question the uniqueness, right? You don't sit and do a requirement analysis per se, you don't get into process study, but focus on when people say we are unique, our process, this is how we have been doing things, right? Question the uniqueness. So organizations have to focus on adapting themselves to adopt the embedded processes. That's the only way you can have a highly successful cloud implementations. Now, you might have unique processes, you might have niche activities to be covered, you can move them to a pass. But oftentimes, not able to adopt the process causes failure to the project. And we have seen the case, for example, a diversified organization that I mentioned earlier, which is migrating from JD Edwards days to cloud, right? They have an organization which is into retail, trading, and so on. You have an extensively customized processes in JD Edwards that they've done, where you're able to review margin at a line level, for every item, order, look at your past price, you have a margin analysis based upon margin percentage, you define your approval hierarchy criteria, and go down to when you have a back order to or a purchase order against a sales order, equivalent of what we call as the drop ships, right? And you look at the margins and decide what level of approval that document has to go through, right? You can, yes, claim that as a unique process for you because you being in trading, you could have a margins, greater control of margins. But when you look at adopting to cloud, right, you can't expect a highly customized processes of your legacy system to be replicated in a cloud product. So as a consultant, as an organization which is adopting cloud, both of us, right? Both the implementer and the consultant play a key role in guiding them, right? In stewarding them, for want of a better word, right? Towards adopting the embedded best practice. Of course, cloud comes with significantly, rapid way of introducing newer functionalities. So try adopting the product and move if there are customizations, unique processes that you can't live without, right? Then move them to a kind of a platform solution. A niche box, build it, come back so you can retire the box whenever the functionality comes into cloud, rather than trying to figure a complex workaround of that process inside cloud, which will lead to significantly high data capture efforts. So the focus has to be on minimizing data capture. People should not be spending time in capturing data of course, we all say as a consultant, right? Your focus has to be on analyzing data, then capturing data, right? So look at minimizing, sorry, Piri, yeah. Minimizing efforts on data capture, and it has to be on outcome focus. As I was saying, when I'm saying minimizing capture of efforts, as Eric was also highlighting, today you've got quite a few tools, RPA, for example. Some of the things which you used to do regular, monotonous, manual activities can always be moved to RPA, right? And some of the products comes embedded with these kind of solutions as well. AI solutions, OCR solutions, for example, invoice scanning and capturing data becomes part of the product itself in many cloud products. So focus on outcome, what you want to achieve of this cloud journey, of this digital transformation, and adopt the processes and minimize and look at tools that will help you improve the efficiency. And there, people play a very important role. People and their mindset. Moving on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So again, many of us would have gone through this part. When you go into an implementation, we insist on a dedicated key user or a champion team, right? And this champion team has to be the right set of people who are prepared to play a change agent role, right? And oftentimes in legacy organizations or organizations hierarchy conscious, organizations which are public sector sometimes, right, where people want to stick to the way they have been doing things. And so then oftentimes what starts as a transformation journey, when you have those mindset, becomes simply an automation journey, right? It's very important. If your objective is transformation, the people who are part of the project should be willing to play the change agent or a catalyst role. If it's an automation, then you don't have a problem. People have to just explain what they're doing today. And we as implementers can always configure, don't question the process, configure the product, customize the product to do what they want. But then when it comes to cloud, you always have a restriction, right? You end up having a significantly increased scope. Scope creeps come in, and you end up customizing the solution with a combination of SaaS and PaaS extensively. So the change agent or a key user that you're bringing in should be able to prioritize the processes, prioritize the effect based upon the effectiveness or efficiency. And most important two aspects in this is, one is, as an organization, you should be prepared to invest in skilling them up. Else, when it's skilling it up, get them trained before the project. When you have a user who are trained on the product before the project implementation kickstarts, right? Then the sessions that you run, CRP sessions, conference room pilot sessions you run, are more interactive, more meaningful, more decisive, right? Else, every session, CRP1, CRP2, which is conference room pilots, and even UAT becomes another training session. So imagine getting to user acceptance testing stage and that also becoming another training session. So the effectiveness of the whole implementation, which is in users internalizing the solution, is lost when you don't spend upfront efforts in training and preparing them. And another important aspect is the executive engagement or executive support, particularly when you're working with organizations which are proprietor driven. There are family owned organizations which are getting into digital transformation, which you will see often, which we, at least, for example, if you look at Middle East, Africa, ASEAN regions, where you have this family owned enterprises adopting technology, transforming their business processes because they want to get out of people dependency to a system driven processes. Oftentimes, if you don't see executive engagement, executive sponsorship right through the project, right, you will see end users driving the project the way they want. In the end, the vision of the organization gets lost. And lastly, moving from people to technology, as I said earlier, you have got variety of tools and options. What will drive, as I said, whether you want to a transformational engagement versus an automation or a traditional engagement, is going to be driven by an organization's ability to adopt or digest the change, right? Technology is the easiest piece in the whole of things. You can have multi-cloud solution, a best of breed solution, or a single unified solution. All of this would fit in, and as Eric said, 80 to 90% of your processes would be covered by most of the product, right? So technology is the easiest thing. Focus on integration aspects, focus on orchestration, but this is the least troublesome part, as long as an IT organization, as people, you are prepared to have a mindset change, right? It's cloud is where actually system control are embedded in the system and the service provider then maintained within your internal IT organization. That's the key things I want to share and open for questions. Perry, I'll leave it with you.
Thank you, Prabhu. This was also very insightful, and thank you for going into a greater level of detail into the ground level of some of the actual ERP implementations. And a lot of your points actually resonates with what Eric had earlier alluded to. And interestingly, with most of us coming from an IT services background, it is good to note that technology is the least of the problem. And I hope it will remain that way. So with that, we have a few panelists, we have a few participants asking us some questions. And once again, I ask the participants to use the QA button that's in the bottom of their screen to raise any questions. We already have a question actually posted by one Dhruv. Dhruv is currently implementing a very large cloud ERP implementation for a North American energy major. So his question is very interesting, changing goalposts. So he's telling ERPs are notorious, ERP implementations are notorious for scope creep and delay. And cloud ERPs undergo frequent product updates, which may impact the agreed design, especially in the midst of an ongoing build or a deployment. So Prabhu, perhaps you should answer this question, start answering the question. He wants to know, how have you handled such product changes in the middle of an implementation? And are there any best practices or precautions we can adopt to minimize the potential for scope creep due to such product updates?
Okay, so first thing is we have to accept the reality that cloud is all about rapid introduction of newer versions, newer features, right? At least from, I know both the vendors, Oracle as well as SAP, they do declare that newer versions or newer features that are being introduced in new releases do not have these functionalities come by default enabled. So I think it's more a perceived fear, right, than a real fear. What happens? Yes, of course, there's a fear of when you have an upgrade, you have to go through a testing, right? There is something which used to work. Again, technology glitches are bound to happen. What works in 20B doesn't work in 20CR. What works smoothly could have a challenge. Typically, what we try doing is do not, because you do have a control, N-1, you can still remind, right? You can skip one version. What happens is you within the milestone, don't bring in a version change. So for example, when you have initial session all the way to solution design finalization, 3 months, 4 months, whatever the duration, right? Ensure that you stay in one single version during that phase. So you're able to finalize the design, the open points, which is a gap, because you have to worry about newer upgrades only in the context of gaps if you have got. The goalpost doesn't change if the process has already been met in the current version, right? So within a milestone entry exit stage, do not plan a version upgrade. Bring in for this upgrade, schedule your upgrades in such a way that it happens either after a particular milestone is completed. So you have got your boundaries clear. If it is design boundary, so you've got design signed off with clear, there may be open points, get that signed off, right? So you move on to build stage or a UAT stage. So that's typically what we do. On a lighter side, probably that's why even product vendors say it's best to do a rapid implementation. So you don't have to face this challenge of, long running implementations.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have any perspective on this?
Well, I think it's Prabhu had a good concise answer there, but I think the maybe a slightly restatement of what he was saying is if you can just keep it simple, sometimes simplicity is better. And phasing is okay. I mean, if there's all these new technologies that are becoming available as you're in the middle of an implementation, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to roll that functionality out or start leveraging that functionality right away. Maybe you move that into the next phase or 2 phases out. So I think it's really easy with how fast technology is changing. It's really easy to get entranced or enthralled by all these new things and the bells and whistles and all the stuff you want right now. So you just have to kind of relax and just say, let's keep it simple. Let's, stick to what our plan is. And then we'll, in the next phase, maybe tackle that new technology. And if you think about it, that the technology is changing. Like I said before, the technology is changing a lot faster than most organizations are able to change. So we have to calm down a little bit and slow down a little bit to just digest what we can at the pace we can digest it.
That's right. And this is also probably where you and Prabhu mentioned about the need for a strong governance. Sometimes when such changes do happen and it is unavoidable, probably a proper strong governance will help to prioritize those updates and make sure only, make sure there is no unwanted scope creep. Thank you for that. We have another question. This one is from Mark, from working with an IT services company in Austria. His question is about rapid implementations, realities of rapid implementations, which we were discussing yesterday. So Mark is asking, Cloud ERPs highlight a lot of embedded next best practices, ease of use and adoption, almost as simple as the consumer applications we are all used to, and thereby build a case for rapid implementation. But he feels the outcome of such rapid implementation is very mixed. So he's asking, probably Eric, you want to take it? Is there any secret sauce or a precondition that influence the likelihood of success of rapid implementations? Or are there any early warning signs that indicate that rapid implementation is may not work for you?
That's a good question, and it reminds me of the whole agile versus waterfall debate or controversy discussion. In that, is it better for us to take a more traditional stage gate waterfall based approach, or do we go with a faster agile approach? And what I always tell clients is there's pros and cons to either answer, either path. And moving fast or moving quickly can be a good thing, but what ends up happening is you end up moving quickly and quickly rolling technology out without having a clear roadmap or strategy or plan for what it is you're trying to accomplish. And how is this, if you're talking about an ERP system and we're trying to do this very quickly and rapidly roll things out, a lot of times what ends up happening is we don't think about how everything ties together. How are the decisions we're making right now in this rapid deployment going to affect other parts of ERP that we will roll out later? And so, it depends on if you're a small entrepreneurial organization and you're a very fast moving organization, you're nimble, flexibility is very important to you, then the fast agile approach could make sense. But if you're a big multinational company and you're trying to standardize your operations and you're trying to gain efficiencies, then the agile approach may actually work against you, and it may be more appropriate to not go slow. You never want to go slow, but you might want to go a little bit slower than the fast agile approach.
Great. In fact, in one of your digital top challenges of digital transformation, you had clearly called out change of process. So companies which are not very clear about their future process may find it difficult to really leverage these best practices or rapid transformation. So thank you for that.
Yep.
And Prabhu, what do you think about this? You have been a part of several rapid implementations. So from the other side, how do you see this?
I think it's to do with, first thing is, are you taking a siloed process, a single business process that you can do a rapid implementation, let's say talent management, right?
Okay.
Or vis-a-vis a holistic HCM change, right? So in an integrated, holistic solution implementation, rapid is going to be definitely a challenge. It's from as an implementer, as a technologist, you can configure the system and hand over, right? But how much of it is, as an organization, as a receiving organization, they're able to internalize? If you have to gain the benefits of transformation, you have to internalize the system processes, right? Adopt, as we said, and that is oftentimes compromised in any rapid implementation, right? So rapid implementation probably sometimes works very well for a greenfield startup organizations where you are not bound by a legacy of processes, where there is no great importance to change management per se, right? Otherwise, you have to give the time, and the time you take is not for you to configure the product or implement the solution, which as a technology you can do pretty much faster, as Eric was mentioning earlier. It is allowing the customer, allowing the users to be able to adopt and internalize those changes. So in that context, it needs to be given adequate time. Yeah, rapid is good in a silo process, and it is possible in a siloed process.
Okay.
When we're going to say whole ERP in 3 months' time, have we done it? The answer is yes, we have done it. No, 90 days complete ERP deployment. Yeah, it's not that non-doable, but it is question is how prepared is on the other side, which is the customer and the users. Yeah, and how urgent, how critical is their need, how willing they are to adopt the embedded product. Yeah, and that would determine. So there's nothing like is it good or bad, right? Is rapid implementation good or bad, or is rapid implementation bound to succeed or bound to fail? No, you have seen rapid implementation being extremely successful, and rapid implementation having led to the product being questioned or product selection being questioned or the implementation becoming a failure very quickly as well. So both you have seen is to do with how well the users are able to internalize it.
Okay, very good. We have a question from one of our participants, Srijit, who is based in Hyderabad, who is working for a SEM consulting organization here. Srijit wants to know what is the best approach in terms of picking the future software. Is it better to go with a monolithic ERP, or what are the chances of picking and choosing the best of breed offering across multiple cloud software like Workday, Salesforce, Logfire? What would be, given a choice, what are your perspectives on best of breed versus a monolithic ERP, especially when it comes to a cloud? Either of you can respond.
Do you want to go first, Prabhu, or do you want me to say?
Okay, I'll just get one outline and then I'll give it to Eric. I think I would tend to avoid the choice of word monolithic, because with all about cloud, it's no more monolithic. It's probably a better description of it is unified. So you look at a unified solution versus best of breed, where you spend time and effort connecting, right? Now, there's nothing wrong in either of this approach. It looks like now, whatever, again, take an example of, let's say, an SAP or Oracle versus Workday, you would do pretty much 90% of what the other does. One would do 80 to 90% of what the other does. It's your ability to manage this process orchestration of cutting across systems, ability to maintain the smooth integration, right? As against a native integration. Okay. Would what influence whether you want to go unified as the best of breed? Is my thought, Eric. You have far more experience in governing projects of this nature.
Sure. Well, I think my answer is along the similar theme of the question about do we implement fast, or do we go with a different approach? It's a similar concept in that best of breed has advantages in that it allows you to go fast. It allows you to take a bite-sized chunk of a broader implementation and do it quickly. And if you look at HCM, for example, human capital management, it allows an HR department to say, okay, we want to just find the solution that's best for us and go implement that quickly. We're not going to worry about what finance wants and what manufacturing wants. We're just going to focus on us. And that could be okay if you're a decentralized company, or you're a very flexible, nimble company. But if you're a company that really values scale and efficiency, and you're really trying to drive standardization, then that creates more problems to have that best of breed approach. That's where the unified or integrated ERP is more appropriate. And I agree with Prabhu. I agree with you, by the way, that monolithic doesn't really apply now as much as it did pre-cloud. But it's still, the point is, do you implement an entire ERP, or do you focus on little pieces of it bit by bit? And it really, there's politics involved in that too. A lot of times politically, a company just can't agree on one single system, so they end up picking off little pieces for different parts of the company. So you really have to understand the politics, the culture, the goals and objectives of your company. And I'd say one thing I would say is there's pros and cons to either one. I mean, it's no answer is perfect. Best of breed creates a lot of problems, like you said, Prabhu, with integration and just managing that all can be very complex. Yep. But the good thing with best of breed is it gives different parts of your business exactly what they want, versus ERP, which it might be integrated, it might make things simpler, but you're making trade-offs with single ERP. So.
Okay. I think we have time for, we have got to 3 or 4, but I think we can take one or even 2 more questions. If any of you have any more questions, you can post them. Right now, this is from Mary Ann. She works with a high-tech company in California. And she has a very interesting question. Thank you, Mary Ann. It's about courage to change. I think probably, Eric, you should take a shot at it first. So she's saying clouds can revolutionize ERP by offering new capabilities that they could not get before. Something what Eric, you also spoke in your session. And it could, she feels that this portends a need to rethink the way businesses are conducted so as to be able to exploit the full potential of the platform. So she wants to know, in your opinion, how different would the cloud ERP market emerge 3 years into the future, and how can a customer better position themselves to unearth and leverage the opportunities that may be enabled by the cloud? So I think she has listened to Thomas Kurian speak in one Google web conference. So Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure. So I think I would say that the key is to maybe prioritize. If companies that can prioritize the technological advancements and the direction that cloud is going and the new advancements and introductions of new technologies, like I said before, it's easy to think that we want it all. We want to do all this stuff now. I think the companies that are going to the companies that can embrace the change the best are the ones that are very deliberate about what and when they deploy. Because you look at these, you look at Oracle and SAP and some of the big software vendors, they're spending tens of millions of dollars, if not more, on R&D, just developing new technology every year. And so it's just, again, more than any one organization can absorb. And it's a good thing because it's creating all this innovation and it's pushing the boundaries of what organizations can do. But you have to be measured and recognize that, technology is always going to be further ahead than we are as humans. And that's a good thing. That forces us to move as well. We're just not going to move as fast as the technology. So I think we just have to be deliberate. If we're deliberate about the changes, we plan how and when we're going to leverage those technologies, that's going to create more openness to the change and acceptance of the change ultimately.
Okay. Prabhu, your views?
No, I think I would completely agree with Eric, and nobody could have said it better than Eric anyway when it comes to change management. So I'll go with what Eric said. Yeah.
Okay. So it's very interesting. Courage to change is something, it's a very catchy question.
It is, yeah, it is, yeah.
And we have another, I think we have 5 more minutes. Probably we can try to squeeze in another question.
Sure.
We have a query, it's a bit, we have a query from DJ from Nevada, and he has not told where he is working, but basically he's asking, what are the best practices to handle data security and privacy and cyber security in a cloud implementation? Are there any specific examples or lessons you might have to share with them?
Yeah, I think typically when you look at cloud product subscription, right, I break it into 3 parts. Any data security or cyber security into 3 parts. One is what happens at the last mile, which is the implementing site between the customer and implementer team, which is today in the context of cloud in general, and also with the pandemic distributed. Yeah, you have the in-between layer, which communicates, which takes the data to a data center and data center level security, right? Most of the players in the context of public cloud have fairly very strong, robust data centers. So I don't think that is a major concern for worry. If you look at any of the leading product vendors, be it SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, any of Workday, so the data center is fairly robust. So you don't have to worry about what happens over there, right? So the focus has to be on the communication protocols and what happens in the last mile, right? And there again, there are technology pieces that you go to when you buy the software. Please make sure that you also subscribe to those, right? Encryption, which is a service, right? It's not always given by default. So you can, organizations choose, right? So it's very important, have a look at the BOM. I'm saying this from the typical experience that we have seen customers realizing down the line that, oh, I have not bought this encryption, and that's an additional cost. Yeah. So it's very important to look at those pieces, particularly in the context of the communication protocol, right? These product vendors offer this kind of encryption as a service, right? So you got to look at that and make sure that you have ticked that box. At the last mile, which is end user side, I think every user organization's policy is what you got to be careful about, right? In terms of when you exchange data between you, when you exchange data between customer and implementer, based upon the sensitiveness of the data, you got to manage. There's nothing like a single best practice. It's the respective organization's policies has to be adopted.
Perhaps if I can just add, previously a lot of focus used to be on the data center security, because most of the users access it within the confines of the safe confines of the organization. And with cloud opening up the access from anywhere, probably a lot of focus shifts to the endpoint security. And that's why we have in many cloud ERPs a lot of white labeling, whitelisting of IPs, and such kind of two-factor authentication to control the the endpoint more robustly.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Eric, what do you have any view on this?
No, that was perfectly stated. I wouldn't add anything to what Prabhu said there. I think that was good.
Okay. We have two more questions, but just let me take a quick look. We have about two to 3 minutes left. So this is a big question. In the interest of time, I'll just try to. It's a very interesting question. This is asked by Durga from Bangalore. She works with an IT major. Her question is regarding the limitations of customizing the cloud, the inflexibility to customize versus, Eric, you spoke about focus on change management, making the process fit for the customer. If it comes to her question is, if it comes to a trade-off between customization, which are a bit perceived to be difficult in a cloud environment because of the shared data code, versus a need, versus a user adoption need, what would you prioritize? How would you approach this dilemma? That's her question.
Well, I think it's an insightful question because those two things are very much related. And if you aren't going to customize and you're going to force people to use just standard capabilities out of the box, it's just going to put more pressure on your change management. On the other hand, if you aren't investing enough in change management, it's going to create more demand for customization because people are resisting the change. So therefore, there's more requests to change the software. So it's a very delicate balance. But what I generally do is suggest is that if you can prioritize or categorize your different business processes and say there's certain business processes that are core competencies. These are our competitive advantages for our business. And those processes, we would be more open to customization. But there's other parts of our business where we absolutely just don't want to customize. It's things that are not competitive, secret sauce, competitive advantages. And therefore, we're going to use out-of-the-box capability. And we're going to invest more in the change management just to make sure that people understand and can embrace the change. So I think that's the first answer. Is there's no one answer for a company. Usually different parts of your business are going to have different answers, but how you treat those different parts of your businesses would be different depending on what direction you go.
Thank you. Prabhu, you want to take a quick stab at it?
Sure. If you look at what I said in the process side, right? Start with question the uniqueness, right, in the processes. If you're convinced that it is a unique process or a differentiating factor for the organization, as a solution that has to be taken care of, addressed, right? And that's where the executive engagement, executive support sponsorship comes in very handy to take that call that yes, it is important, I can't live without it, or I will lose the competitive edge, right? Then you look at, and there are various easier ways of customizing. You don't have to necessarily, yes, you can't customize the cloud, but you have paths to take the process out, execute the change there and bring it back. So those mechanisms can be adopted. Yeah?
Okay.
But I think the question, the uniqueness is where you will take a call. Do I change the product? Do I change the process? Yeah.
Okay. That's an eternal dilemma even in our on-premise ERP.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think we have almost come to the end of the hour, and like everything in life, this webinar has to come to an end. So I would first and foremost like to thank Prabhu and Eric for your time. And sharing, more important, your practical perspectives from your own cloud ERP implementations. I'm sure me and all the participants would have found it very interesting. And I would also like to thank all the participants who have registered, who have sent us some queries by mail. And After this, we would shortly over the weekend send out a mail with the link to a recording of this, and we would also share the contact details of all the panelists. In fact, we would love to hear from you, your feedback about this session, as well as continue this conversation, if I can say, on any of it in the during our presentation. And with that, I would I would wish you all a good rest of the day, and thank you for joining.